right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Today, my colleague Rob and I will be talking about the impact of your leadership style on your employees and your colleagues. So, hi, Rob. Thanks for being there, and thanks for helping me host this webinar. My co-animator. So, we're gonna go right into it. Why are we proposing this webinar today? Why do we think this is worth 50 to 55 minutes of your time? Really, there are a few reasons, and one of the main ones being understanding the impact of your leadership style will allow you to do certain very specific things that can be useful for you in your professional and even other aspects of your life. I know what I have learned based on the leadership styles and the DISC model that we're also going to talk about today, I've also used in my personal life. But what does understanding the impact of your leadership style allow you to do? Well, it allows you to adjust your approach quickly to perhaps avoid resistance or unnecessary delays. It can also allow you as a manager leader to connect better with others without overpowering or over adapting. We're not talking about changing who you are. We're talking about adapting the way you sometimes communicate or onboard or try to explain things to people or to simply pitch a new idea. So connecting better with others without overpowering or over adapting would be another thing that understanding your leadership style allows you to do. Knowing the way you react and the way you are in certain situations and the way you lead also allows you to maintain a safe environment without carrying everything on your shoulders. It can also enable you to balance your need for structure without stifling relationship flow. That being said, let's jump into today's program. Really, what you're getting today is an overview of the content from like 3 full-day training sessions. Those 3 full-day training sessions that we offer, one of them is the 8 dimensions of leadership. So that's the first thing we're going to be talking about today. The second thing is the DISC styles. So we're going to go into my style, your style, our style. So we're going to talk about the DISC styles today. And we will also talk about the 5 questions of emotional intelligence, which is a full-day training that we offer in itself. As we usually like to do, we'll wrap up today with pitfalls, risks, tips, and impacts. And we will guide you through the themes of our upcoming free training sessions. So let's dive into our topic today let's start with an important reminder, all right? Choosing the right approach. This echoes one of the core principles of the DISC personality model. And that core principle is that the person who demonstrates flexibility, the most flexibility, will usually have the greatest impact or influence on the system. The more adaptable you are and the more flexible you are in your way of leading, usually the person who most adapts and who is most flexible has the greatest potential of having the desired impact or influence on the system or the group. What does choosing the right approach mean, therefore, in this context? Leadership is the ability to adjust one's approach, like I was saying before, remembering the person who demonstrates flexibility will have the greatest impact or influence on the system. So leadership is the ability to adjust your approach and behavior in order to maximize impact with different people and in various contexts. while remembering that adaptive leadership is not a compromise, but rather a strategic skill. Choosing the right approach when you're leading also requires understanding the unique needs, preferences, and dynamics of each situation. Why? Well, to influence effectively and constructively. Ultimately, what this adaptability allows you to do is it allows you as a leader to foster collaboration, engagement, and the achievement of shared goals. So I want to give you an example here of this whole adaptive leadership context, and it not being a compromise, but really a strategic skill, something you can develop and really apply to your everyday work with your teams and your workplaces. So let's imagine, and little nudge to my colleague Rob here, who used to be in the education world. Imagine a school principal leading a team of teachers. That school principal's leadership approach could vary. Sometimes, during a crisis, the school principal might have to adapt a more commanding approach, providing clear direction and quick decision-making to reduce uncertainty. Let's remember here, crisis situation becomes a lot more important to make decisions quickly and to reduce uncertainty. Commanding approach, you're taking the stage and you help your team feel like you've got this. So you might adopt a commanding approach. As a school principal, in another context, for example, when introducing a new teaching method, you could use a more inclusive leadership approach, involving teachers in discussions and gathering feedback before implementation. Why? Because the more flexibility you are able to exert, usually you will have the greatest impact. And when you're introducing a new teaching method, the impact is probably buy-in from your teachers. So you could use a more inclusive leadership approach. Same scenario, generally speaking, with the school principal. When working with an experienced and self-sufficient teaching team, the leader could choose a more deliberate or affirming approach. It might be best to give teachers autonomy while recognizing their efforts. So depending on the very specific situation or context, the same school principal could adopt a more commanding, inclusive, or deliberate and affirming leadership approach. This ability to adjust leadership style based on the situation is what makes a leader circumstantial, situational, rather than rigid, bringing us right back to one of the core principles that I started out sharing at the beginning of this slide. The person who demonstrates flexibility, in this case, the leader who demonstrates flexibility, will have the greatest impact or influence on the system. So off to my colleague Rob for the next section of our webinar.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks for opening things up and setting us some examples. When I look at leadership, I can't help but taking my years in education, working in the classroom, both teaching youth and teaching in the adult sector. And we're always, adapting our teaching styles to different learning styles, because if we have a certain teaching style, we want to get as much out of our teaching style to get to as many students as we can. Well, it's the same idea with our leadership style. We know that the most flexible person is going to be the best leader. That's for sure. And we know on any given team, you're going to have people within the DISC leadership, the schema, for example, a number of I styles, D styles, C styles, S styles, a complete blend of different people. But when you're actually leading them, how are you going to do this? Like, what are the different dimensions? What I like about how the 8 approaches set up is they work around the DISC circle. So I'm going to take some time and go through each of these 8 approaches and sort of try and identify some of the characteristics that best go with them. For example, if we'll start up at the top to the left with the commanding. That would be well within the D style. We talk about somebody who's commanding. If they have a commanding leadership style, they're confident for sure, displaying unwavering confidence. They can take initiative in those critical situations, and they would direct their leadership actions towards achieving concrete results. A commanding leader, as it says there, as you can see on the slide, they take charge of situations with confidence and inspire others to achieve results. So that plays real well to that D style. Now, if you take somebody, as we're moving a little bit more to the right towards the I style, somebody who's pioneering. That's a pioneering leader will do or ask these types of questions or show these types of behaviors. They'll actively seek out new opportunities. If you're pioneering, you're pushing established boundaries when it's appropriate, and you certainly support bold and innovative actions, because a pioneering leader encourages creative thinking and knows how to seize new opportunities. Then that humble person in the C style would demonstrate humility in actions and words, remain calm even under pressure, and they would prioritize fair and impartial decisions. That humble C style leadership. Then as you move over to the S area, you're going to the steadiness area. You're going to have somebody with more of an inclusive, perhaps, leadership approach. And in this approach, an inclusive leader involves diverse individuals in decision making, and they really value the opinions of others. So they would be more inclined to have these types of characteristics. They would be open to diverse ideas and perspectives. They would foster constructive and respectful dialogue, because we know that C styles like respect and they like that calmness piece as well. And they would encourage others to take active role in decision making within the situation. So those are I guess the 8 pure, or the 4 pure ones: commanding, pioneering, inclusive, and humble. Now we go on to the next 4. We look at things a little bit different. Also closer to that D style or that direct style, you would have that resolute approach. And in the resolute approach, you have a leader that sets high standards for the group. They're pretty sure of what they're doing, so they're unwavering, and they're using methods that maximize effectiveness. Again, high expectations for both the team and themselves, so they're quite, I guess, hard on themselves or direct on themselves, and they tackle problems directly and without delay. There's not a lot of procrastination there. They continuously, or reflecting rather, they continuously optimize processes to enhance overall efficiency as well. Again, that resolute leader sets high standards for the group and uses different methods that will maximize effectiveness. So it's more of a resolute piece. We move to that other I style leadership style, which is that energizing one. That approach would have a lot of enthusiasm. Like, energizing leader sparks enthusiasm to achieve the group's objectives and builds a broad network of professional relationships. Professional relationships are important. They inspire enthusiasm to drive the achievement towards common goals. They'll mobilize resources to ensure collective success, and they build strong and lasting professional relationships. Relationships with the I styles, very important. Going back to the C styles, that deliberate leadership would look something like this. You would ensure that communications were clear, accurate and clear. You'd conduct a thorough analysis before making decisions. Remember, the C styles are those conscientiousness thinking people. They like the numbers and they like that reflection. And they provide a stable framework that allows the team to grow with confidence, because they've had those accurate pieces because they've had that deliberate, because that deliberate style works well with them. You go to the next one would probably be the affirming one. Wait, I already covered that one, didn't I? No, not yet. I didn't do affirming. Okay, the S style, yes. An affirming leader is approachable and creates an environment where people feel valued, supported, and confident in their contributions towards something. They foster a welcoming and positive work environment. They recognize and they certainly appreciate everyone's contributions, that team collaboration piece, and they're ready and accessible to offer support to a listening ear. So you take a look at those 8 different approaches, and they're really trying to get to everybody and be as flexible as possible and to get to everybody's strength and or weakness. Now, when you look at these different approaches, it's very hard to practice all of them all of the time. And we are different because we're all in unique blend, right, of different styles, that we probably have a few of these that are easier to use than others. So we're going to drill down into that a little bit more as we ask some questions.
I've also put, Rob, I've put the tool that we've put together for the participants for today's session. So I believe the title of the document is in French, but when you open it, you will see that it is in English. Pardon us for that. So the title of the PDF that I've just put in the chat for today's participants, the title is in French, but when you click on it, I swear it's in English. So you can use that tool all through our training today. So Rob went through the 8 approaches to leadership, and those 8 approaches are synthesized in the tool that you have. And I believe Rob has a few questions for you.
Yeah, remember we talked about the leadership styles and approaches, what comes naturally to you. So if I was to ask you the question, and we have a slide out here that you participate in, which 2 of these approaches come most naturally to you? So we take a few moments to fill in those, and then we'll look at the results.
In your career as an educator, Rob, which one have you found comes most naturally to you?
Well, Julie, I knew you were going to ask that particular question. For me, I have to say that I am an I style, so it's always been easier for me to ask those pioneering and energizing types of questions. Very important to me. It's about relationships. It's about coming across to people. It's about being very positive. The glass is always half full. So those are the areas that I always find an approach that comes well to build other people up. Let's try the new ideas. Let's see what can go right, and we'll worry about what will go wrong later. And that's why it's important for me to have people on my team who will have that style and that to look at other areas as well. But naturally, to me, those are the first 2. How about yourself?
Well, Rob, I'm also an I style. So to me, those would probably be the 2 that come most naturally to you. As I've grown in my career and in my professional life, I have been in situations where I had to adapt and become more flexible. So I would say for me, the third most natural to me that I've had to use and that came naturally enough was the inclusive leadership style, having to foster a good environment for discussion on the idea that I was proposing, on this groundbreaking initiative that, of course, I in my I style thought was, you know, the Queen's Gambit, like the thing, the next, the
Nothing.
Holy Grail. I had to take a step back given who was there working with me on my team, and the inclusive leadership style would be the third most natural. Yeah,
Yeah. And again, the question was what comes most natural to you, knowing that we do have
absolutely.
to adjust styles and approaches to different situations depending on what the type of message we're given. Like you said earlier on in this session, we talked about a safety and security issue where you had to be, no matter what, very commanding and very out there, depending of what it is versus a consultation process, which might want to tap into some of the different approaches, so you can get that
Absolutely.
different feedback and
Sometimes you,
different
yeah,
information with different engagement. Okay,
yes.
well,
And which one? And we'll let the participants respond to this as well. But which two leadership approaches feel the least natural to you? So when you're thinking about, let me just backtrack here. You have the tool in the chat, but if we look at this wheel, or if you look at these
what's the
four
most
approaches,
important? Well, for me, what was most difficult is probably in and about those deliberate pieces, looking at the clarity pieces, because as an I style, for me, I like things to happen relatively quickly, and I want to be able to get my message out, because remember, I'm excited about those messages. So it's difficult for me at times to put together more of a deliberate style. Remember that we want that stability and well-considered decisions with all that analysis in there. So that's a little bit harder for me to do. It doesn't come
yeah,
natural. And
yeah.
the other one would probably be the resolute approach
Okay.
for me.
I think for me, and when I think about this humble approach to leadership, I have a, I think that would be my biggest one, and not that I'm not humble, because that's not what this means. And if you're listening to us and following us, the fact that I am or you are coming up and saying, well, the most challenging for me would be the humble approach to leadership. It's just more remaining calm, even under pressure, and prioritizing fair and impartial decisions in all situations, especially when I'm under the gun. That is difficult for me. That would be difficult for me as a leader. So I think for me, the most difficult one would be humbling. Cool. Thanks, Robin. Thanks for those who interacted with us on this. So in the first block, we've talked about leadership styles. Now we're going on to the very disc portion of today's training. What we're trying to do with this content today is just get you thinking, really. When I looked at the content for today's webinar, I told myself, we're probably going to make our participants reflect a lot on who they are and how they lead. So before we even get started, I'm just going to say that before we go into the disc part of the training, your natural style is not universal. One can adapt their style. And it is important as a leader to adapt your leadership style and use certain aspects of other disc styles to help foster and create those healthy and productive work relationships. Remember that by adapting to the other person's style, so a colleague or whatever it may be, you can help create working relationships that are more fluid, more effective, and more respectful. What I'm trying to say here before we even go into the content is it's not because Rob and I are I style that we are always and in all situations I styles. For example, I can, in certain situations, move over very well to the C style and be very meticulous and very attentive and very structured in my approach and very, very conscientious in my way of doing things. I'm still an I style, but I can definitely, in some situations, use characteristics typical of a C style to my advantage or to my team's advantage. So before we even begin, I invite you all to think of one person. Think of a colleague. I'll give you a few seconds here. If you have a pen and paper, you can even write it down. Write a person's name, colleague. Now let's play a little game of you trying to decode that person's style. All right, you ready? The first step in decoding someone's style is to place the person on one of two natural tendency continuums. So the person whose name you wrote down, are they more, pardon me, outgoing and fast-paced? Or are they more conscious and reflective? So the person you've put down, is that person more outgoing and fast-paced? Or is that person more cautious and reflective? And then that same person, are they more questioning and skeptical in their way of being and approaching certain situations in the workplace and in your professional, in a professional setting, pardon me? Or are they more accepting and warm? Based on these two natural tendency continuums, if you chose outgoing and fast-paced, the person you're thinking about is probably a D or an I style. If the person is cautious and reflective, probably a C or S style. If the person is questioning and skeptical, they're most likely D or I. If they're accepting and warm, they're most likely I or S. But to help you even break it down further, there are four styles, right? The DISC style. And I understand we're going to go quickly here because this is a full day training and it's called DISC collaboration. So we're going to go over them quickly. But this person that you're thinking about, that you've identified as being outgoing and fast-paced, questioning and skeptical, are they also questioning and skeptical? And if so, they most likely fall into the D style. Now, what are the main characteristics of a person with a D style? It will be a person that is direct, that is firm, that is usually strong-willed, a person that is results-oriented, a person that can be forceful, and a person whose motto is get it done. Now, if the person you're thinking about is not a D style, but rather outgoing and fast-paced and more accepting and warm, then they might be an I style. I is for influence. This person is most likely outgoing, most likely a very enthusiastic person. I like the term exuberant, just figures my style. Optimistic is also another characteristic of the I style, high-spirited and lively. This person's motto, or this person likes to be, their motto would be recognize them. Let's bring them on the team. Let's discuss, let's recognize them. They're more focused on the who. If the person you are thinking of is accepting and warm and cautious and reflective, they might be an S style. S is for steadiness. This person is often even-tempered. This person is often a very humble person. Also an accommodating person. Someone who's harmony oriented, someone who's calm, someone who's predictable, someone who is tactful, someone who is patient. Their motto is let's get along, if we had to give them one. And the S styles, posing a question, how? And now let's wrap this little part of our training up with talking about the C style. So if the person you were thinking about is cautious and reflective and questioning and skeptical, they're probably a C style. C is for conscientiousness. These people tend to be very fact-oriented. So they're analytical. We're talking here about people that are very precise, analytical, private. The C style is more often a very systematic person, a very precise person, and can also be reserved. Their motto, if we had to give them one, is get it right. And their question would be, why? I hope we've got you thinking. When I first started this slide, I invited you to think of a person and place them on here, right? I asked you to think of a colleague and place them on this model. Now I'm asking you to do it for yourself. So you can look at this. You can also look at the tool, the PDF that we've put in the chat. Remembering that no style is better than another. I was giving this training once and I heard someone say, well, no one wants to work with a D style. And my reaction was, can you tell me more about that? And they went into an explanation of why they were pointing the D style as being maybe less desirable. And then it got me thinking about the D styles that I know in my life. My dad, and one of my favorite people in the world, is a strong D style. My husband is a CD style. Every style has its own set of characteristics, but there is no one style that is better than another. And we can all, at specific times, in certain situations or in certain contexts, go from one to the other. What I'm asking you to take away from this is that under stress, though, people tend to amplify their natural style, and your natural style of collaboration is, like we were asking you before, what comes more naturally to you? So what comes more naturally to me is influence, but I can also be analytical, systematic, and precise at other times, which are characteristics from the C style. But naturally, my style is I. And so is Rob's, actually. So I'm asking you, before we continue on with our content, to just have a reflection on your style. Where are you on this model? And you can keep thinking, but I'm going to keep going here with a golden rule. How often have you heard this? Treat others the way you want to be treated. I know I've heard this a lot. I will admit, though, since I've discovered the D style and since I've started working in training and coaching and all of that stuff, I've replaced the golden rule of treating others the way you want to be treated with the platinum rule, which is treat others as they would like to be treated. Because we do tend to interact with others the way we like to be treated, rather than adjusting to their styles. However, let's go back to the main premise. The person who has the most adaptability and flexibility will often be the one that has the highest impact on the system. which is why we encourage you to treat others the way they want to be treated, especially in a team setting, especially if you're trying to get on board to a new way of doing things, especially if you're there to coach them and accompany them in their role. So what does this look like? Let's use an example of a manager with a C style and a secretary with an I style. Actually, let's flip this over. I'm going to use a personal example. My manager, when I first started working, was a C style. I am an I style. Before we did the DISC training and before I got to know her very well, she was asking me a lot of questions about why I had made certain decisions or why I was inclined to use this or why or how doing it this way. And I told myself, oh my word, she doesn't trust me. My manager does not trust me. Maybe she doesn't even like me. But it wasn't that. My manager was a C style and I was an I style. In order to maximize my collaboration with her, I realized I had to cross over. And in her manager C style, she also had to learn to work with me as an I style. What does that look like? Well, the manager adapts to a C style by, for example, listening to the I style stories when she comes home from her weekend. She'll listen attentively. The C style will show enthusiasm for the I style's weekend stories and engage warmly with the I style, although it's not natural or it's not the most natural way of being or doing things. And why do it? Not to be fake, not to pretend, but because that's what's required of your role as a manager, learning to adapt and work with all kinds of style to foster good work environment and healthy collaborations. Rob, I am most certain that you have an example of either you as a manager having to adapt or either or. So please
Sure.
regale us with one of your examples.
Yeah, I have
real life examples.
I have a couple of real life examples I can share. One in
Amazing.
particular. I mean, we talk about people treating others as they would like to be treated. I think we have to look at treating others how they need to be treated. And no better time than if you're working with employees, you're supervising employees, for example, and having to deliver any type of constructive, perhaps a job performance review or an evaluation or something of that nature. And when you're going to be bringing information out that may not be necessarily fun or entertaining, but important, you might want to use questionings or approach that style that is going to help that employee be more engaged and to have and speak about something that will resonate a little bit more and get that enthusiastic response going and sort of move into that emotional part, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. How do we get people to really register a message or remember a message? So certainly with evaluations or having any difficult or constructive conversations, it's so important to be able to adapt to that person's style as to better get your point across, because it's all about the engagement, and you don't want people to just stop listening to what you're saying. You want them to feel part of it and react and share whatever they need to about the situation.
Yeah. So the next slide is a question, because right after this, Rob is going to bring us into our third main topic of today, and that being the 5 questions of emotional intelligence. But before we go there, with which DISC style do you feel the most friction? And to get your reflection going on the topic, I'll give you a few examples. And I'll go back to this slide, if you don't mind. All right. So And you can go back to this in your tool that we gave to you in the chat. Let's go back here and let's go over this quickly. So a D style might find a C too slow or hesitant. A D style, from my professional experience, might get or can get annoyed at the amount of questions the C style person is asking and feeling like that's hindering progress, whether it be in a meeting or other. An S style might find an enthusiastic, exuberant I style like me overwhelming, even disorganized. A person who's more of a C style might judge an I style person as too vague or impulsive. And an I style might perceive a D as cold or too blunt. So with which disc style do you feel the most friction? I know for me as an I, the C or the S probably would be my answer. What about you, Rob?
For me, it's definitely the C. I mean, I'm a strong I style, so for me to work with somebody or the style of somebody in a C, which is the exact opposite to me, I find it will give me the most friction. That being said, if I'm working and collaborating on a project or a job with somebody of the opposite style, I bet you my results going to be better because I've been working with them. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, your opposite can be working with a person opposite style can cause friction, but it can also produce a very favorable outcome for the project, organization, or task.
Yes.
Which I can't help but go back to the notion, Rob, that there is no one style that is better than the other. They are all equally, they are, right? They just are. And we all have natural tendencies, and that's it.
The other piece, Julie, that I find very interesting, and when we do our full session on DISC, we get to spend some time visiting these examples. But it to have the opposite style is one thing, but it's not any easier if you have a group of all the same styles as well. Like trying to get 5 or 6 I styles to come up with a plan. You want to have a couple C styles around to help you. And of course, those D's and those S's. That's really the point of this.
Absolutely agree, Rob. So there you go. Bring us on to the 5 questions of emotional intelligence, Rob.
Yeah, well, I guess when we look at emotional intelligence, and this kind of stuff has been around for quite some time. I mean, there's a lot of theory out there based on the work of Daniel Goleman and a lot of others that, metacognition, that emotion and that 93% of any message is emotion and how that's so important. And as a leader, if we really want to make things go better, it's more than just decoding. It's really transformational. We have to think of it as that emotional compass, I believe, and it's something that we use to help us through all situations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to ask ourselves 5 questions or 5 things that should be tingling in your tummy, so to speak, when you approach a situation. And the first question is, what am I feeling? Do you understand your own emotions, where you're at, when you're looking at something? Do you know whether you're in a reactive or open state? Can you see if stress or fatigue or any tiredness is involved and maybe impacting your behavior? And then will you be able to adjust your communication so it's not clouded or doesn't move towards a negative move? It's that whole, what am I feeling when we ask those questions? The next thing is, the question you'd ask is looking towards your audience or whoever you're trying to communicate with. What is the other person feeling? Can you read, the nonverbal cues of people on your team to know which which approach to take. Are you having to adjust your message to escalating tensions within the group? Do you have to create a psychologically safe space? Is that what you're trying to do? Like, how is the other person or the other people feeling? Then you have to think, what kind of impact am I going to have on these people? What's the impact going to be on the team? It's not the what you say, it's the how. It's the how you say it that becomes very important as well. Your perceived impact is often different than your intention, so that's why you have to be careful. That's why it's important to check and to validate before you put your message out there. Like, how is that person going to take your message, and what impact is that going to have on the team? And of course, because we know that we're a mixture of different people, a blend of different styles, how can we adjust? What do we need to adjust to put our message out there? What are the strengths? What are there any blind spots? What are the emotional needs of everyone else around you? And are there any dynamics or problems that could hinder trust, or I guess any sort of touchy spots to look at, to ask yourself, what can you learn from this interaction? So it's essentially, it's almost like, I like to think of it a little bit about coaching questions. You're just continuing asking yourself a little bit more about you, your audience, the impact. Can you adjust it along the way? Are there any blind spots? And what do we learn from all of this? So this is really the emotional intelligence approach. So I think we have a little bit of a practice that we're going to be able to do. And I can ask Julie the first question, and participants out there could certainly be thinking on this. Just imagine you're in a meeting with a colleague who seems irritated. Although this may never happen, I guarantee you it will. You're presenting a project that matters to you. The person appears distant and asks very critical questions. You leave the meeting feeling frustrated. So, okay, you're with the colleagues, they seem irritated. You're presenting something that's really important to you. The person seems out there and distant, and you leave the meeting frustrated. So why don't we go back and practice now with those 5 questions and ask ourselves, well, what are you feeling? Well, I tell you what I'm feeling right in this situation. I'm frustrated. I'm feeling doubt. I might even be a bit angry or disappointed that I'm being blown off by my colleague. Well, okay, that's me. What's the other person feeling? Are they confused? Are they tired? There's resistance there. Why? That the person's not engaged. Why? I'm having some impact. So I'm going to think, well, what impact might I have on them? Am I intrusive? Is it unclear what I'm saying? Am I not giving enough data and not enough explanation? Am I not enthusiastic enough about my idea that they think it's worth listening to? Is that why they're disengaged? Am I being too pushy? Am I trying to cram an idea down their throat? Am I trying to give them something, like force feed them something that they're not ready for? You know, is the timing off? Often the timing is not right. So then I have to ask myself the 4th question, because remember, I'm frustrated and I'm confused, et cetera, what can I adjust in my message? What can I go back and say a little bit different in this conversation? What would I need to say to clarify my intentions? Is there an open-ended question that I could ask this colleague to get a little bit more from them? Because remember, the open-ended, it's hard to get how somebody's feeling about something when you're asking them yes and no answers. But if you get them to tell you a little bit more about something, or to remember when, or ask what would it look like, those open-ended questions, you're usually going to get a little bit more out of them, and perhaps that engagement piece will come. you know, and sometimes is this a situation maybe that you have to come back and talk about a little bit later that requires a little bit of reflection. So then you'd ask yourself the fifth question. I remember we're still, our example here is about that meeting with a colleague who seems to be blowing you off and you're frustrated and irritated, et cetera, et cetera. You just start asking yourself, well, what am I learning? Well, I've learned that maybe this other person needs structure, that my enthusiastic, especially because I am a high style and I'm enthusiastic, I might come across as disorganized. So I'd have to, you know, scaffold all those pieces to prove to them or make that first person feel, that colleague feel that I've looked at all those different areas and it's supported and all that. So it's I guess, Julie, it's just an example of questioning yourself and probing to look at something a little bit different. And if we ask ourselves these questions, it's going to help us come up with better ways to touch all the different styles, which is important. And it takes time. And when you're in that transactional type of leadership style approach, you know, it's hit or miss at first, but if you're more conscious about how you are communicating what your leadership style looks like, you'll know the signs of how it's connecting with others.
I love it. So we hope we've caused you to reflect, of course. Also, don't forget that we've put the tool in the chat. It's a PDF, it's a one-pager that synthesizes the 3 main blocks of today's training. So the 8 leadership styles, the DISC styles, and these emotional intelligence questions. And why? Well, let's remember that the theme of this webinar is the impact of my leadership style on my colleagues. So we are doing this to better tool and equip you as leaders on, well, it's not just about my colleagues and how they're feeling today and their natural collaboration style, but there's something that I should be actively thinking of and considering when being a leader. Your leadership style, your DISC style, and these 5 key emotional intelligence questions. We're hoping that by giving you this, we will at least give you food for thought on the impact that your leadership style might have on your employees and your colleagues. And we are leaving you today with our typical pitfalls, risks, tips, and impact. So the first trap, if we might say, the first pitfall, relying solely on the characteristics of the DISC model to decode an individual's style. The risk here is falsely decoding the other person's style, therefore awkwardly trying to work better with them. The main takeaway here, using, among other things, the tool that we gave you, rely on the 2 natural tendencies to decode an individual's style, their energy and their focus. And if you look at the tool that we gave you, all of those main points are there. And if you're able to at least do that, an impact is probably a better connection and collaboration with your colleagues, and therefore less stress, and therefore a more enjoyable, work environment, collaboration, meeting, project, whatever it may be. Rob, up to you.
Yeah, I think the next one, the next trap, so to speak, is believing that a person possesses all the characteristics of their style. I remember we're a blend. So if it might be an I style, you might not possess all of the characteristics, just most of them. And the risk here is to treat that person according to a single mold. That one size fits all is a risk. And a good way to sort of mitigate that risk is to get to know and understand the person, to build a relationship with that person, and to have more of a conversation with them. So then you'd be able to sort of sift out and find out which of the characteristics that person were really dominant with that person. because they're not necessarily all of them will apply. And the impact of taking the time to have a conversation with the other person is to get a better understanding of their needs and priorities, and ultimately have better communication and make more of an impact.
Thanks, Rob. So the third pitfall would be believing that your style is a good excuse for not practicing what doesn't come naturally to you. The risk here is missing out on opportunities for personal development or opportunities that could make you shine. The best tip that we have here for you is to behave according to what the situation requires of you. I know for me, sometimes my work requires me to be the C style around the table, to have more C style characteristics in this task or this project or this specific interaction. By being able to behave according to what the situation requires of you as a manager, leader, will allow you to have a better synergy with others and better interact with your surroundings. And Rob with the last one.
I'll take a look at the last, although there's others, we've only covered a few. Another important trap is believing that it's always the other person or me who must adapt. In other words, we talked, it's a relationship, so there should be the give and take, not just adapt your style to mine or I must adapt my style to yours. You sort of to meet in the middle, because what happens if you're like that, you're going to have that resentment, and resentment will often lead to less collaboration, right? You know, okay, if nobody's going to get along or nobody's going to do it, or we'll just not get it done, or we won't be enthusiastic about what we're doing. So the key piece, and again, we've said it a number of times in this session, but the experience in working with different leadership styles with people is all about that flexibility. Like I mentioned earlier, whether it's if you're a teacher and you're teaching to different styles, you need that flexibility to be successful. With leadership styles, you also need to be flexible. The person who needs the other is the one who must be more flexible and adaptable. That's really what it's all about. If you can be flexible and adaptable, you'll have a higher level of influence, and you will make the most impact, and you will solicit the most collaboration. So
I can't help but go into an example here. Yeah. I can't help, Rob, but go into one last example before we let you go today. Let's fictional scenario, but not so fictional. Rob is my colleague, or actually, Rob is my employee. I am his manager, and I am pitching an initiative, and Rob is the person on my team who has the most expertise and experience on topic X. I'm a manager. I really need Rob for this initiative. I really need him. Who between myself and Rob needs to be the most flexible and adaptable? Probably me, because my initiative relies strongly on Rob's expertise and his collaboration and buy-in to this initiative for it to be a success. So it's probably me as a manager who has to be more flexible and adaptable in this situation. I always give the analogy of the boat. If I'm in the middle of the lake and my colleague Rob is on the shore and I desperately need Rob for my initiative, I should be rowing towards Rob from the middle of the lake to the shore. I'm the one who needs something from him. I'm the one who will find a way to get to him because I need him for this initiative. I always like to give that example when we're talking about, collaboration styles, and the person who needs the other is the one who must be more flexible and adaptable.
A good example.
So we will let you go today with the same little tidbits of information that we do every time. Please follow us for our next free training, free webinar, Meetings we love, 3 types of gatherings that foster collaboration. That will be June 3rd at 11 a.m. And 4 phrases that kill team spirit, the impact of words in the workplace, which will be on June 17th at 1 p.m. I am also going to remind you that our webinar recordings are shared in our newsletter. Subscribe to our newsletter to receive these recordings and much more. We always have tidbits of learning in our newsletter. We have the recordings, and there's a tool in there usually for you to to look at and consult. And of course, if you need to talk about your challenges, or you're interested in hearing more about, or you're saying, oh my gosh, I need to do this with my team, of course, please reach out. Reminder, we did 3 things today, 3 main blocks, which are 3 trainings, full day trainings that we offer. So the 8 leadership, 8 approaches to leadership, pardon me, the DISC collaboration, and we also did the 5 questions of emotional intelligence. So you can schedule a meeting with a member of the team by using this QR code, or by visiting us at discatis.com, scrolling at the bottom of the page, and you will see all of our lovely faces, Rob's, mine, my colleague Alain, my colleague Micheline, and my colleague Melanie's face as well. So thanks for being with us today, guys. I hope you took something away. And thank you, Rob, for co-hosting this with me.
Always a pleasure. Have a good day.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.